We had a new campaign and a different GM, so I wanted to try out something different from the norm. An archer sounded like an interesting challenge, so I built one. Tracking my ammo, scouting to plan combat, inevitably getting killed in close combat because I literally don't have a second weapon, I was ready for the whole thing from start to death. The very first game day, the party is magically split up, so I climb a tree to look for them. Naturally, the embodiment of death appears in front of me and plucks out my eyes. I am now a blind archer. I hear a pack of rabid dogs apparently coming up to me, so I do the only thing that makes sense now, that I am the worst and most useless archer, and fall out of the tree and lay down and let the dogs kill me. The DM says, I pass the test. Turns out, death was actually some kind of Zen embodiment, and now I am a monk, so I don't need a bow. I told them that I keep waiting for the dogs. Ah man, Dungeons & Dragons, a game where your choices can really affect the world. There's nothing like getting your eyes ripped out of your head session 1 and being forced to play a different class. Truly, the reason we all play Dungeons & Dragons. I've been playing in person for a while, but I finally decided to try an online game of Dungeons & Dragons, but our group ran into a major and immediate problem. The DM was using a completely outdated browser. Seriously, it was cumbersome and clunky and just resulted in a slower overall game. If only he had used Opera GX. That is right, Opera GX is back as the sponsor of today's video. They are an incredible browser made specifically for gamers, or really for anyone who wants a little bit more out of their web browser. I understand that switching web browsers can be a bit of a daunting experience, but Opera GX makes it easy. They are compatible with all Google Chrome extensions, and they have a quick import tool that allows you to easily move all of your bookmarks, add-ons, and whatnot right into your brand new Opera GX browser. Once you're there, Opera GX has tons of awesome features like integrated social media channels that allows you to access stuff like Twitch and Facebook right there in their sidebar, and also custom animated wallpapers that allows you to do cool stuff like this. Finally, the most incredible feature is Flow, which allows you to easily connect GX Mobile to your desktop version and send files, videos, and notes between browsers in a single click. So, if you guys are interested, you can head down into the description down below or to the pinned comment where you can pick up Opera GX on your desktop or your mobile phone for free, by the way, so you can take advantage of all the awesome features. As always, supporting our sponsors does support us. Thank you so much to Opera GX for sponsoring today's video. Without further ado, I'm going to turn back into an animated rat so that we can get back to the video. Throwaway, because I have no idea if the people who I played with use Reddit, but since finding this subreddit, I've been craving the catharsis of posting in it. I'll try and keep it brief. I joined a game after years of D&D 5th edition inactivity. I joined a pre-established game with a group of people I was decently friendly with. There were several DMs in the Discord server, and one of them liked how I played enough to invite me to one of their games as well. The problem lies in the player I'll be calling Sophie. Without being too specific, I was in my early 20s during the time of this, and Sophie was almost 20 years older than me. Big age gap, but whatever, she seemed nice enough. The problem is, when this woman, twice my age, starts to become a bully. The Dungeon Master's baby and spoil her to hell and back. Whatever she wants, she got. There was once an entire hour of gameplay, where her player character got fitted for new armor, and we just had to sit there and watch. It wasn't unusual for several hours of gameplay to be dedicated just to her and what she was doing. There was one game where a solid 2 hours was just dedicated to her character. I was so ecstatic to have a D&D game, I blew it off and endured it, even if it happened in 2 different games. Until she decided to bully me. My player character ended up getting along with an NPC her player character liked, and I thought it was harmless fun. The DM did too, but Sophie took this as permission to bully me instead. She would start to drop passive-aggressive comments and would cut me off in conversation in and out of game. This would escalate into her character bleeding out in the second game we played together in, where she yelled at my player character. When called on it, she used a family member passing away as another excuse to bully me. I got concerned and talked to the dungeon masters. They agreed this was a problem and tried to get us to work out our differences, except her behavior didn't change, and when I was firm and cold with her in my frustrations, she cried to the DMs. I didn't insult or berate her, I just spoke very carefully the facts of the situation and what upset me, and reassured her time and time again that I didn't hate her and wanted to be friends, but I didn't like how she was treating me. Everyone used baby gloves with her, despite her being almost 40, because she was one of those people who talks in baby voices and does the ooh-woo nuzzle you thing. What the hell? I tried to use similar baby gloves with her to be mindful of how everyone else treated her, even if I was frustrated, but she went to the DMs and said she felt like she was being persecuted for a crime. The DMs had to explain to her my logical and impartial communication style. I hate being misinterpreted, so I tend to choose my words very carefully, but eventually, when the DMs realized she was enough of a handful that dropping her out of the game might have been a good thing, despite reassuring me in private they'd be willing to do it for my own comfort, they went back on their word on that. The DMs really valued Sophie, so they tried to force a Discord call with themselves present to intervene in the situation and get us to be friends again. I'll admit, I snapped a little bit because I was frustrated I was being treated as equally in the wrong for giving it to her straight in my concerns, despite me reassuring her that I still wanted to be friends and didn't hold it against her and was trying to reassure her throughout all of it. Turns out, Sophie had gone to the DMs and lied about everything I'd said, and I caught her in more lies in screenshots they shared with me and compared it with my own screenshots and messages with her where there was visibly no malice or ire there, and I was clearly trying to be nice and bond despite everything. When caught in her lies, I was frustrated on this forced to get along crap of a call and expressed that frustration. I didn't insult anyone, but I do admit this is where I messed up, as I expressed frustration at the lies and the babying of her, and how it wasn't fair how someone twice my age was allowed to bully me and get held with minimal accountability, and I left in a huff. Fast forward, one of the DMs sends an essay about how I'm a terrible person who tried to make them choose between their friends, and basically dedicated several paragraphs of trying to gaslight me about this entire thing, how it was my fault and how I'm not a good person. Another party member agreed I should have spoken up sooner about her treatment, but I tried to explain how I hadn't spoken up because I knew she'd been going through a rough time. But this treatment went on for months, so naturally, I got tired. I started to legitimately believe I was the problem for not letting her take things out on me, and that the DMs had been right to go back on their word because she was an inherently more valuable player than I was. The truth is, Sophie was their favorite, and Sophie knew it, and took advantage of it to get rid of a player she was insecure about. Since I was better at art than her, the whole thing is a big petty mess. It felt like she was transporting me back to high school. I hadn't realized how bad this game was until I left it and shared my experiences with other D&D players who showed genuine horror at what I'd been through. Like I said, the gaslighting had worked, and I legitimately believed I was an awful person, and remember trying to beg the old DM for the forgiveness I hadn't gotten. In both games Sophie and I were in, her character got hours of screen time, where I'd be lucky to play for an hour. Sessions averaged 5 to 6 hours. The DMs promised to fix this, but they never did. The worst of it was a 6-hour battle training session where my character fainted early on, so I wasn't allowed to play for the rest of the night. I played for 20 minutes in the beginning of the session, mind you, out of the 6 hours, and this was a common occurrence, whereas Sophie was given all the screen time her little heart desired, even at the expense of the rest of the party. The DMs also made every mistake of DMing you could make, and I didn't realize it until I'd left and played actual good D&D games. There's obviously the choosing player favorites, but they'd also have a million NPCs and a million side quests, and the party was constantly split up, so they could have their own little arcs and things with no sense of team unity or uniform goal whatsoever. Almost all of the sessions I was in, the party was separated to do their own shopping and have their own interactions with barely any combat or any teamwork. You'd basically get the game started and have to wait your turn in your own little vignette with no team bonding or team goal or team quest or anything. And when you started one side quest, 4 more side quests would pop up and no storyline ever got resolved. So it'd be like, we need to investigate this warehouse. Oh, but this tiefling looks suspicious, so we need to stop what we're doing and investigate her. But oh, this fountain is glowing with weird magic, so I guess this is our priority now. Because that's how the DM would do their plot hooks. I remember the DM proudly telling me that the story would go on for 10 years by their calculations, and I firmly believe that's because they never streamlined anything and didn't know how to be concise. Well, this is longer than I expected, so I'm a hypocrite on that concise part, but I'd like to thank this subreddit for giving me space to get this awful experience off my chest. I'm in much better games now where I can actually play and bond with some really awesome people. Favoritism is something that we talk about a lot. What reason is behind this favoritism, we don't know. Maybe the DMs are in love with Sophie, or maybe they're just good friends. We have no idea. But whatever the case, favoritism is bad, and the story showcases a perfect example of that. It's also a showcase of a player trampling all over another player. Player-to-player rivalries are something that happens a lot, usually just because characters are rivals, and it's just made in good fun. This is different. This is one player who hates another player for an inexplicable reason, whether it's art-related or whatever, again, doesn't matter. That is not good. That kind of hatred is not good for the table, and investigating what is happening and properly interrogating who is the aggressor in the situation is very, very important. In situations like this, you just make the actual victim, the person who's being straight up bullied by an older member of the party, well, you make them feel ignored, and that's never a good thing. Look, I'm not saying that you need to execute all bullies, but you do need to back up the person who is being attacked in this tabletop role-playing game. They're supposed to be playing for fun. Before the pandemic, I ran a teaching table at a local game store that always had a fantastic group of players. There were 3 tables set up, and we passed the players along based on experience. Brand new ones were at table 1. This table typically walked through character generation, basics, and so on. Table 2 was moderate players, often dealing with broader concepts and the like. Then you had my table 3, which was for those wanting to learn to run the game. This was done with a rotation, with me helming every other adventure, giving advice, explaining why I did things, then rotating to the next player in line, and me sitting next to them as they run their game. We had a solid system going for nearly 2 years. On average, there were roughly 20 players across all tables on these nights. When we were sending off players, there was typically a major epic spanning all 3 tables. This particular night, I remember, it's one of the only times in my 20 plus years of running games I have ever snapped at a player at a table. My main rule at my tables is always, never purposefully do something that ruins someone else's fun. The party was made of one of the most interesting groups. A half-orc warlock barbarian, he didn't know he had the pact, so every new warlock power freaked him out. A drow cleric of life, a dwarf cleric of the forge, a half-orc kensei monk, an elven horizon walker ranger, a goblin wizard, and a green dragonborn swashbuckler rogue. The rogue always had issues. His character was very poorly statted, which led to a bunch of botched rolls and hits from enemies. He swore he was this long, experienced role player that was just new to 5th edition. His constant poor performance often led him having table frustrations. That part was understandable, however, he was asked on several occasions if he would like to revamp his character, but he always declined. In this adventure, the group were in a dungeon that kept descending down on steeper and steeper inclines, until the last one, which required a hard dex check or other means. The current slope is steep. It has steps, but they are uneven. There is also water flowing down the steps, and traps in the hand holds. The dwarf had decided to ride his shield down, but botched terribly and found himself 200 feet below the party, low on health from the fall, and in an opening with carrion crawlers. The party, except the rogue, started tying their ropes together to make it easier to descend so they could try and save their friend. The rogue opted out of this plan and figured he could just go down on his own faster. He failed the dex roll. He had been failing rolls all night, failing to hit in combat, failing to leech filled water, failing to notice things. I could see him getting mad, so I let him have a strength save to catch himself, which he passed. At this point, the rest of the group were starting to descend on the ropes. Clever idea. The rogue says, "I wait for them to pass me." This piques my curiosity, but I saw no real harm in it. At this point, the party is in full-bore chatter mode. They are trying to figure out what to do when they get down to the bottom, who is going after the crawlers, who is healing the dwarf, etc. In the middle of the commotion, I hear, "I cut the rope." I look to the rogue player and say, "Excuse me?" They say again, "I cut the rope." No one else in the group heard him or were actively paying attention to what he said. Now, I rarely ever do what happened next. No, I wasn't loud, I wasn't harsh, I was very simple and to the point. I don't have issues with in-game, in-party roleplay conflicts to a point. Someone lightly hitting another character or slinging a small spell at someone based on context can add a party story layer of fun, sometimes, but this action was actively breaking my number 1 rule. I hear from the rogue, "What? Taking away player agency, are you?" At this point, he raised his voice, and suddenly the table was listening. "No," I responded back louder this time. I know my face had to be serious because everyone was suddenly transfixed on me. "Why not?" the rogue asked. I stood up from my seat, put my hands on the table, and looked at him. Why? Because one of two things is going to happen as a result of this action. Either they fall to their deaths and have to make new characters, which will ruin the night for everyone but you, or they survive the fall and now are mad at your character for having done this and will likely murder your character for the act. Why? Is because it violates my rule number 1, the rule I reiterate every time a new player joins this table. The table fell silent, and he sat down, grumbling, "It was just a joke," before he proceeded to pout and check out for the rest of the encounter. After the session, I asked to talk to him off to the side away from everyone, but he declined. I approached each player privately over the week to get their take on the event, and they all agreed to just talk with him before taking further action. He missed the next several sessions. He had several excuses, but I now know he was bad-mouthing me to other players because they brought it to my attention. Sadly, there is no further resolution to this as the, PayPal pneumonium hit, and the beginner tables were closed as a result. Many of that group still meet on the regular, and I pop into their chats from time to time to see how they're doing, but the rogue has all but vanished from the local RPG community. TLDR, player gets mad at his luck and opts to take it out on the rest of the party, forcing me to step in with a hard no. This is something I have been advocating for since the beginning of this channel. DMs need to be allowed to say no, especially in situations like this. Now, of course, you don't want a DM that's saying no to every player decision. That's bad. That's called railroading, and yes, when taken to an extreme, it is very, very bad for tables. Players need agency, but here, if your agency leads to other players not having fun, then your agency is bad for the table. The only person who benefits is the problem player in that situation. And I would argue that not even the problem player benefits, because a sour table is not going to function properly. Instigating like this leads to bad things. I'm glad this DM put his foot down. We need to see more of this in the future. I believe the tale I'm about to tell began some time ago, approximately a little more than 1 year ago, I believe. I was invited to play D&D with a group of newcomers. Actually, only 3 of them were newcomers, I think. Another 2 players and I played before, and one is a know-it-all about D&D. One of the newcomers was dating the DM, and another one was a friend of hers. Let's call the girl dating the DM Wizard, and her friend Nice Guy. Well, but Nice Guy always looked a bit down and excluded, since Wizard would spend more time with the DM. And because I know this feeling of being excluded, I want to help him to feel more welcomed. I tried to become friends and would geek out about RPGs, since it was the only subject we would have in common. Mostly we would talk a bit before and after the sessions. There was even a time when he was pouring his heart out because he was in love with a wizard, and seeing her with the DM was painful. I tried my best to be a good friend and just stood there listening. In general, we didn't talk too much though. Anyway, I guess I should explain some context before going into the piece of resistance. I usually leave my character's love life to the dice. If there's a cool NPC or player character that did something worthy of it, I'd roll a d20. 1 would be no interest at all, and 20 would be friggin' in love. Well, that happened. Nice Guy's character did something cool, and I rolled a 20. My character is a bit of a shy bard. Kind of funny, right? So she didn't do anything at that moment. But the seed was planted, and yeah, I know, it was dumb. I stopped doing it after that. But before this incident, it never went wrong. My friends knew how to differentiate me from my character, so it was a bit awkward. But my character was awkward. My character wasn't acting lovey-dovey, just super protective and such. I even made myself clear, because people started joking around, that it was just an in-game romance. His character was really clingy though. No idea why his character fell in love with her, but you know, okay. Then came the day that Nice Guy came to talk to me and confess his feelings for me. Obviously, I was flattered, but didn't feel the same. So, I rejected him and asked if it would be okay to just be friends, and if he was comfortable with the way our characters were in-game. If he needed space, offering that our characters would only be friends as well. He begged to keep the relationship between the characters as it is, and it kind of weirded me out a bit, but in the end, he convinced me that it would be alright. Yeah. No, it wasn't alright for me, so I started distancing my character. Yeah, I know, I shouldn't do the metagaming thing, but I was really not comfortable with this. Quick aside, guys, as long as you clarify why you're doing the thing, there's nothing wrong with taking an action because it makes you, as the player, more comfortable. Being comfortable and happy during your leisure time is more important than being immersed during your leisure time. Anyway, to make things worse, the DM was becoming really good friends with Nice Guy and made some romantic situations for us in-game. The situation was getting pretty uncomfortable, and I even tried to talk about it, but it landed on deaf ears. There was even a situation where Wizard, Nice Guy, and I were on a Discord channel, and he said a quote from one of the Batman movies and asked if I knew it. I did, and I said the quote. Then he told us that he had promised to marry the girl that could say the rest of that quote. That was tense. I want to leave so bad. Going back to it, well, Nice Guy's character became extra clingy, and it was hard to bear. Lucky for me, my character was suffering from emotional damage, and it made it easy for me to make her a little distant. I remember one day, POS... What's POS? Personal operating system? What's that even mean? Anyway, before the game, we were talking about Japanese food, and he started going off telling me that the use of chopsticks is a domination technique applied by the government to enslave their people. That this is obviously true because using a fork, knife, and spoons is so much easier. It was bonkers, and he was 100% serious. He ended up being really friggin' racist and started cursing me out. That not being enough, he used my low self-esteem against me, a thing well known in our group. I had enough and told him to bugger off. Did you think that this is the end? Oh no. No, it isn't. The DM was really sorry for his bro and told him to send me videos of himself explaining his actions and apologizing. At least, that's what he said. Man, almost 2 friggin' hours in videos and some lovely text messages saying that it was a misunderstanding, that he's not to blame, yada 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 yada. Basically, he's right and he forgave me. I didn't see the videos, only read the messages, and was pissed and told him to stop the BS and said I would try to keep things civil because of the RPG. Another pretty big mistake of mine. Didn't have much problem after that because this Nice Guy left the RPG since his character was, well, pretty bonkers in the head and made a lot of bonkers decisions. Of course, my friends that watched some of these sessions and socialized in that first group were pretty pissed off with Nice Guy. My closest friends hated him even before that whole thing. We talked about it, and they're pretty understanding with me after several "we told yous." I love these guys. They are a bit protective sometimes, like I'm their sister, which is kind of wholesome. Did it end now? Nope! Nice Guy would not leave me alone, so I blocked him on all social medias I could find. After a little while, a month or two, I was using Telegram more often than WhatsApp. I was having a little fling. It's over now, but we're still friends. Anyway, Nice Guy found out about this and installed Telegram to talk to me. This little piece of bonkersaurus texted me a Bible saying that we should go back to the way things were, that he forgave me, that I misunderstood him, that he needs me, that he's in constant pain, and that we have a special and mystical connection. I was appalled. Since I'm petty, I did pinpoint some of his arguments to show how far from reality they were and finished saying that I don't want to talk to him. Blocked him there as well. Sometime later, my friend told me that Nice Guy was posting some garbage about me on Facebook and showed it to me. He posted my character's appearance, no, it couldn't have been a coincidence, and a text saying how sad he is for having lost his only chance at love. The text was going on and that. I was clearly in love with him. Say what? And got tired of waiting for him to make the first move. That his fault was having little faith in love, and now he's all alone with a gaping hole in his heart. Oh, the agony. I was weirded out by it, but decided to not bother and just ignore it. My spider sense was working again, and I was really pretty uneasy. It probably was the result of watching too many true crime documentaries, right? More months later, a guy that was a friend of Wizard, remember her, came to talk to me on WhatsApp saying that Nice Guy wants me to unblock him and give him another try. I said I wasn't comfortable with it and that I don't want to talk to him. That's why I blocked him. The guy didn't bother to insist. And then, present time! 2 days ago, yeah, more than 1 year since I said no, he made an account on Facebook with the name of his character and sent me a message. Same thing as always. This time, he said that he only cursed me out and said all those nasty things a year ago because he was in pain. He said that he needed me, and he would only be happy when I was around, that he doesn't want to live anymore. Once again, mentioning that mystical and unique connection that he felt with me. Guys, no joke, I recognize, unfortunately, emotional manipulation when I see one, and that message was a glorious example of it. This time, I'm wiser and just blocked the new account, but I must admit that I'm quite uneasy. It's so, how can I say it, strange? blood chilling? I don't know. I just feel uneasy now. The way he wrote the message was like he made some fantasy in his mind and firmly believes it. I just am really weirded out. My friends are quite pissed with him, of course. And now I'm debating if this is enough to get a restraining order on him. The end. Thanks for reading. TLDR. Guy thought that the relationship his character and mine had was real, declared his feelings, and got a no. Turned nasty with me and got blocked. A year passed, and he is still trying from time to time to convince me to give him another chance, and that we have a mystical and special connection. I know this is the answer that everyone always gives, and I think it is usually pretty unhelpful, but in these situations, it really is the best thing you can do. You gotta walk away. You got to leave. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like that's always easy, especially in IRL games. It can be hard to walk away from Dungeons & Dragons, especially if you have some friends in that group. Getting away from people like this can be very, very difficult. Trust me, I know, I've seen it, I've experienced it, but it is the best thing that you can do. You cannot fix the situation. You can't just throw it under the rug and pretend like things are just going to work out, because that's not what's going to happen. I have no idea how a restraining order would work in this case, but I wish the OP best of luck with getting away from this guy. I know my favorite tavern goers already know this, but guys, in-game romance usually does not lead to out-of-game romance. It is in-game. If you develop feelings for a person, that is an out-of-game thing. You handle that out of game. You do not try to flirt with someone through a Dungeons & Dragons game. I don't think that's going to work out. Full disclosure too, I did cut out a section of this story. You wouldn't have even noticed because it didn't even appear in the TLDR. I thought that it was a bit disconnected and also touched on some subject matter that I just wasn't comfortable putting on this channel, so therefore I cut it. You can check out the OP's account if you want the full details. Alright, and that is going to cap it off for today's episode of RPG Horror Stories. If you guys enjoyed, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then please do subscribe to Crispy's Tavern. We've got a lot of exciting stuff coming this week because I have just moved out of my old place, and we've got some cool stuff coming as a result of that, so stay tuned for more. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down into the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment. Don't make it weird to let me know you made it to the end of the video. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Farewell.